A question I've been getting a lot lately is how do I hire a manager or how do I grow a team? And which is a good thing because it means people are growing and they're getting to that stage in their business. But lately I've noticed a lot of people are asking me pretty much the same thing more or less. It's like, how do I promote someone into management? How do I promote team leaders? Who do I identify as being potential candidates for this? And how do I put a hiring ad out there so I can find people to fill this role from outside the company if I don't have anyone who I think would be a good fit for it, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, okay, so I thought I'd just do a little episode talking about this because I'm now pretty experienced in hiring people and I've made plenty of mistakes and I've had an equal amount of success as well at doing that. So I'm actually putting my second location under management pretty soon. I've got the person picked for it. We've had multiple meetings about it. She's beginning to shadow me and she's being trained for the role. I'm pretty much priming her now and she'll be set to take over at the end of July. So at the time of recording this, it's nearly May. So we're going to have a couple months where I'm just training her. She's shadowing me and I'm slowly, excuse me, I'm a bit sick at the moment. I've not been sleeping very well. That's a whole other thing. Anyway, so we're going to have a couple months where I'm just kind of training her and taking things step by step and just seeing how comfortable she is with different aspects of the business. And we're just going to start slow, start small, and then incrementally build up over time until she gets to the point where she can manage the full workload that is required of that role. So I thought I'd do a little episode talking about how I manage this, how I've approached this in the past, what's worked, what hasn't, and let's just get into that. So first and foremost, the thing that a lot of people don't really realize is that in your business, you are the bottleneck. 90% of the time, you are the problem. Most business owners, they never clearly define what their business is, what their business is doing, what direction they're headed in, and let alone that they don't even define what their role is and what their responsibilities are and their key performance indicators and all these different things, right? They just kind of do what needs to be done. And it works early on, but then, you get stuck doing everything and your team never really steps up to kind of fill that gap that you have. And it means that you can't scale because when you get to the point where you want to put someone else in your shoes, it's absolute chaos and mayhem. And you could get lucky and you could put someone into that role that just kind of takes stride in it and does really well. But a lot of the time I see people just wasting so much time, money, effort, and energy because they don't clearly have a role defined and they don't even know what they're trying to promote someone into or hire someone to do. So first off, you are the bottleneck. That's the first thing that we just need to humble ourselves and realize that a lot of the time we are the problem that's in the way of getting to where we want to be. So that was something that I had to realize early on. I thought, business is going well, revenue's high, profit's high. I've got so many leads coming in, I'll just get anyone to just come in and I'll just tell them, hey, just manage this. I've got the leads coming in. It's pretty simple. Just do what you got to do. And, it was very push and pull and it obviously didn't work. And so, when I've put my first location of the cleaning business under management back in 2023, this was September 2023, I put it under full-time management. I did things the right way in the end. I slowly just built that role over time. I didn't just throw someone into it. I didn't just throw Stacy, my operations manager, right in. It was kind of like I grandfathered her into the role. So she was a cleaner, she was my first employee ever. So she started as a cleaner. She showed a lot of discipline. She showed a lot of diligence and really good work ethic. And so over time, she went from being a cleaner into a trainer, and she was training our new hires. And then, she showed even more potential there, and she showed that she had a lot of ability and a lot of capacity to still want to grow in the company. And so I was like, hey, let's explore the opportunity for you to, potentially do some more managerial stuff. And so she began shadowing me just to see what it was like. And I had a few meetings with her and I was like, this is what you can expect. No 2 days are the same. These are generally speaking the core responsibilities and things that I'm doing day to day. And I just started with the simplest things. I made a hierarchy of all the different tasks I have and the things I do on a day-to-day basis. And this is the first really important thing that everyone should do. Even if you don't want to hire someone, if you don't want to replace yourself yet, you should do this now. And later on, this can become basically like your SOP handbook for the role that you have. And even if it's not something you want to do for a long time, I would recommend you do this now, and then you can do it like once every 6 months, once every year, and just kind of compare your progress going forward. And that's a day in the life. A DILO, a day in the life of. So what you want to do is you want to create a DILO for yourself. Every day you just want to document all the things you do. And what I strongly suggest is that you rank them from, lowest ROI to highest ROI. And then you want to go through that list and kind of just annotate how much time each of those tasks is taking in your day. So let's say you have an 8-hour workday. You might have quoting in there. You might have responding to emails, setting the schedule, following up with leads, doing quotes, posting in Facebook groups, keeping up with the social media, all these different things. You can go on and on. You probably don't realize it, but there's like probably 100 different things you do every day. And so you want to write all of these things down and then write roughly how much time those take. And then also just annotate like what the ROI is on that. Like, posting photos on the business Instagram isn't nearly as high ROI as like quoting is, going out to people's houses and actually and getting sales. So you want to list all of these things out. And then now what you have is a framework that you can deconstruct and reverse engineer and turn into an operations handbook for your role, essentially. And you can do this for everyone in your team. You can do this for team leaders. You can do this for management, whatever, right? But it all starts with you. So if you're a solo operator, even if you don't have any staff, do a day in the life of, and just write down all the things you do on a day-to-day basis, how much time they take, and the priority of those different tasks. And then eventually when you want to bring someone in to take over your role, let's say you want to have someone, take over some management stuff, what you would do is you would take the easiest or like repetitive and low ROI tasks, and you would give that to that person. You would create a role that is kind of based around these different low-level tasks, right? They can be the cornerstone of that new part of the business. Like at the moment, we have upper management, we've got workforce coordinators, we've got area managers, and so the workforce coordinators is like a step down from kind of the upper management, and they do lower level tasks. It's not really low level, but it's lower than like sales and quoting and all that stuff. And so we identified those things as being highly repetitive, very time consuming, but also low ROI. So we created a whole new role for that, and that was deconstructed from like doing these day in the life of exercises with our team. So that's kind of what I'm getting at. You want to have that hierarchy of different things that you do on a day-to-day basis. And then as soon as you can, you just want to delegate the low-level tasks to someone else, because if you can, even if you're, like I said, if you're a solo operator, your day in the life of is going to be like 80% cleaning, right? And the other 20% might just be like really, really basic admin and manager stuff. So you can just literally bring like a VA in, so let's say that you're making $1,500 a week as a solo cleaner. And let's say 20% of your week is just spent doing repetitive admin that literally anyone could do. You could bring in a VA for like, part-time, $100 a week. You can give the VA that 20% of admin that you do, and that frees up 20% of your week that you can then go and, even just do more cleaning, because that's going to generate even more revenue. So you can increase your weekly revenue by, from 1,500 to like, 1,800 or whatever it is, because you've delegated the low level and low ROI tasks to someone else that you can pay less than what your time is worth, if that makes sense. So if your time is worth $70 an hour, because that's what you make from cleaning, then you should not be doing stuff that someone can be paid, in the Philippines, like $5 an hour to do. That's kind of what I'm getting at here. And then the stuff that is high value, high ROI, return on investment, that's the stuff that you want to keep doing yourself. Now, you shouldn't delegate everything. I'm a strong believer and a big proponent for the founder or the business owner being the face of the business, the driving force of the revenue and sales and like all the marketing and brand. I think that should always be your focus. Of course, you can bring in like a person to help with that. You can bring in a social media manager. You can engage with a social media agency. You can do all these different things, but you should always be at the top of that. And then everything else, it can and usually should be delegated. So that's how I kind of structured things very early on. It's what I'm doing now with my second business location. So I've got, like I said, 2 locations, Bunbury and Perth. We've got cleaning businesses in. Bunbury is fully self-contained. I've not touched that business in 3 years now. It has grown exponentially without me. And it all started with these simple, like day in the life of just deconstructing my day, operationalizing what I do, and really just putting it in plain, simple, clear writing, and then slowly building that role up over time. You can throw someone in there with like a full SOP handbook and, all these frameworks, but I've always been, like hire slow, fire fast. So I've had instances where like I've hired an assistant manager and I just kind of tried to throw them in. We had like the whole role mapped out because we'd had someone doing that before, and we just put someone in there and we're like, it's not a hard role. They should be fine. And then long story short, it didn't work out. So I don't know, for me personally, it's always just worked better for me to just build the role up over time for that person. And it usually means they have a much bigger commitment to the role because they've kind of stuck with it for a while and they've built it up themselves as well, which I think is important. You want to have people or give people the freedom and the parameters that they can move around so that they can actually build that role for themselves, and they can kind of build it to their strengths and let it play to their strengths and their weaknesses as well. Like when I promoted my operations manager in my first location, like I had a lot of strengths that were her weaknesses, but she also had a lot of strengths where they were, weaknesses for me. Like she's very, very good on the phone. She's very good at just doing cold approaching and like cold calling and stuff like that. And so I let her lean into that and I let her strengths play into the role. I didn't just try to make a carbon copy of myself. I took the framework of what I was doing and then I allowed her to kind of put her own spin on it and grow in it and add her own like creative touch to it. So that was one of the most important things that I did early on was just creating day in the life ofs. So since then, I've asked all of my management to do these things. I've done it with my VAs. I've done it with the workforce coordinators. I've done it with, my operations manager again to this day, like, because obviously roles evolve over time and as the business grows, things change. And so you want to keep updating these things every now and then just to see how things are tracking, and you want to compare, because one year you might have these low level tasks that it's only taking 10% of their time, but then the next year it could be like 30% of their time. And we're like, well, why is this creeping up? Why are we not delegating this to someone that's, in a lower pay grade? And then we can focus on the higher, return stuff, the higher value stuff. So you want to do these things regularly. It's a really good exercise to do. And it's really easy to do because you're already doing these things every day. All I'm saying that you should do is you should just map these things out, write them down, write a priority level next to them, and also how much time is being allocated to that on a daily basis. And then you want to average that out over a week and over a month. So day in the life of, very, very simple exercise, very important if you're trying to grow a team and ultimately grow the business. Because when I work with founders that are at that stage where they want to grow and they've got a small team, but they don't really have a management infrastructure in place, this is one of the first things I'm doing. I'm looking for misalignment. I'm trying to identify the disparity between high value people doing low value work and the low leverage tasks that are taking up the most time, and like the bottlenecks where everything flows through one person. So this is usually where the owners are stuck doing admin, or like they're stuck doing scheduling, and they're not really focused on like, the lifeblood of the business and driving sales and driving growth. So once you've done that and you've done the day in the life of the DILO, that's when you can turn things into structured SOPs. You've got, let's just say, a list of 40 different things you do on a day-to-day basis. Okay, now you can start to group these into categories. You've got, sales, operations, client communications, safety, security, what have you, right? You can group them into categories. And then within those categories, you can create SOPs for each different thing. Okay, quoting. This is how we do online quoting. This is how we do in-person quoting. Sales. Okay, this is how we get sales. This is how we post in Facebook community groups. This is how we do our flyer runs. This is how we run Google Ads. This is how we monitor the Google Ads. Safety. This is how we do take fives. This is how we do job safety analysis things. This is how we do like incident reporting. And if someone gets injured, this is the process for that. Then you just start to deconstruct it bit by bit, create the frameworks, create the groups, and create the SOPs. So if you've seen my management matrix or management nexus that I show off from time to time on like my Instagram and stuff, that is essentially how we built that. And if you haven't seen that before, it's basically like our SOP data house. So we've got all these different categories. I'll even just bring it up right now because there's so many different things in there. So we've got strategy, we've got marketing, sales, operations, HR, finance, all that stuff. Excuse me. I really need to get some good sleep. My mind just doesn't shut off lately. Like I don't know if anyone else is like this. Probably a lot of people, honestly. We're all wired the same as business owners. But like I just lay in bed for hours every night and just cannot get to sleep. It's it's the bane of my existence. Sleep. Anyway. So those are like the things that we have. Those are like the main categories. And then everything kind of flows through that. And we have different SOPs within those categories. So like finance, we've got SOPs for cash flow, accounting, like late payments, how we invoice NDIS and DVA. In HR, we've got like our employment database. We've got how we recruit cleaners. We've got our awards and level up system. And all of this comes from just doing a day in the life of. It all flows through that. So it's one of the most important exercises and practices that you can not only do once, but also do again and again. And then you have like a baseline that you can compare to every, quarter, 6 months, every year, whatever you want to do. And then once you've done that, that's when you can move into creating role clarity cards. So once you've done DILOs, once you've done these day in the life ofs, then you will have a clear idea of what the different roles in your business would actually look like. So, let's just say you've got team leaders. You've got cleaners, team leaders, you've got area managers, you've got operations managers, you've got you as the director or the general manager, so on and so forth, right? And virtual assistants and whatnot. Once you've done day in the life of for yourself and other roles that you may have or want to have in future, then you can create role clarity cards. So the role clarity cards in our business, the way we structure it is, we have core responsibilities, we have a role overview ahead of that, which just kind of outlines everything in the role, has links to like the SOP data houses. And then we've got the success indicators. So we've got the role overview, we've got core responsibilities and success indicators. Now the success indicators kind of go hand in hand with the responsibilities. So for example, for operations manager, one of the core responsibilities is like, driving growth or handling sales. And then we've got a success indicator, which is like adding an extra $4,000 in recurring net revenue, monthly recurring revenue every month. So that's like, about $50K a year every month being added to the business. That is a success indicator. That if the person in that role is hitting that metric every month, then they're hitting their targets. And so that is indicative of them being successful in that role. And then, you can have performance-based bonuses that are tied to that. You can have a pathway that leads them up into different roles and whatnot. So, you can do the same thing with VAs. If you have someone that just answers the phone and answers emails, their responsibilities could be like answers emails. And then a success indicator for that could be, less than 5% or, it could just be like 0% unanswered emails every day or every week, that kind of thing. And then what you can do after that is you can have clear roadmaps and clear incentives and bonuses that are tied to these role clarity cards, which are derived from the DILOs. So I hope you're seeing how this kind of all flows through. So you start with the DILO, then you can deconstruct and operationalize the role, and then you can create role clarity cards that have success indicators and core responsibilities, and that can then tie into the roadmap so that people have a clear pathway for moving up in the company, for getting performance-based bonuses and incentives, which is really how you grow a business. You don't grow a business just by, paying someone an hourly rate. They need to have their performance, like if they're in a management role and, their work is directly tied to the growth of the business, they should be getting a cut of the business's growth. Like just bar none, plain simple, like that's how it should be. That's how I structure things. And it's how it's how I've become pretty successful at what I do. So once you've got that role clarity card and you've mapped out those responsibilities and success metrics, then you can have that roadmap so that people know, if they're in a team leader position and they want to go into management, like they know this is how they can get into a management level role. They need to be in alignment with these values, with these responsibilities. They need to be hitting these success metrics. And then that way there's no guesswork and there's no you've got people that feel like they're pulling their weight and, they're doing all this work and they're not being appreciated and they're not being given raises even though they think they're worth it. But then you actually look at it and it's like, well, you're not actually hitting the KPIs and the success metrics. So, that's why it's really important to have these things mapped out, because emotion gets really, really, it really clouds people's judgment. Like people will sometimes feel like they're doing a lot of work, doing a lot of impactful and high value work. And they get really emotional about it. But then you look at it and you look at the cold, hard data and the facts, and it's like, well, you're not actually doing as much work as you say you are. And then that, creates a bit of a fusion and a bit of tension. So it's really important to have these things just like black and white so that people know, if they're not hitting this target, then they're not going to get bonuses. They're not going to move up in the ranks. And, it just avoids that whole awkward, kind of friction later on, which I have also experienced before I had this whole system laid out. And you can do other things as well, because I've got a whole management team, everyone knows their role clarity cards, everyone knows their responsibilities and success indicators. One thing I've done is I've kind of fused them all together so that if our operations manager, let's just say that she's hitting her KPIs and everything's good, but one of our other office staff isn't, then they know that none of them will get bonuses essentially. There's bonuses that are tied to their individual performance, and then there's bonuses for the whole team. And the whole team will get a bonus only if the whole team is performing. And so if the ops manager is doing well, but one of the other office team isn't, then everyone else will step in and kind of help them and bring them up together, because it really is a team effort. And if one person's doing great, but the rest of the team isn't, then that's not good for the business. So that's just a personal thing that we do. I'm not saying you should do that, but I'm just kind of saying what I've done and what's working. But so that's kind of the gist of it. That is the whole blueprint for success with hiring and building and structuring a management team. It starts with just deconstructing your day, doing the day in the life of, and then you can operationalize the role that you have. Then you can contextualize it and actually break it down into really simple terms and have responsibilities. And then from those responsibilities, you can derive success indicators and KPIs. And then you can build a role clarity card around that. And it's literally an A4 piece of paper. It's really easy. We don't overcomplicate it. In fact, all I've ever done over the years is just try to distill and simplify and dumb everything down as much as possible. And, that's kind of the cornerstone of how we run our management in the business. And it's now proven, the proof is in the pudding. I've now almost got my second location under full-time management, and, I'm just going to do it again and again and again. And, it's a great feeling once you get these structures and these systems in place. And it really is simple once you have the right processes and procedures that you can always, kind of rely on. And so, yeah, that's it for today. Very exciting times ahead for myself. I'm very keen to put things into motion. Like I said, this is I obviously had that goal when I started the second location in Perth that I wanted to get this under management eventually. And even though I've been doing all these other things like building the social media, doing mentoring, and also just keeping my finger on the pulse of the other location, and also just trying to live a little bit, I've still been able to build a business up profitably to the point where it can be under full-time management. So, yep, that's the goal. Get that done by end of July, and then I'm just gonna take a bit of a break, travel for a while, just want to see the world and get out there a bit. So that's kind of a personal goal of mine. And then when I come back, it's going to be the next stage of my growth plan and my vision for the company, which is going to be franchising or licensing or something within that realm. And so, yeah, it's great when you have that North Star, and then you just kind of reverse engineer and work towards that. So everything's falling into place. We go through the ebbs and flows of business, and if you listen to the last episode, you'll know that I was just getting pretty jaded about everything, but that's going to happen, and I want to normalize that because it's just like it's inevitable in business. Like, you're going to have those ups and downs, but if you have that true North Star and you know what you're doing and you know what you're working towards, then you're never really going to get derailed. You know what I mean? Like, the people that give up when they experience hardship, it's because they didn't have that North Star. They didn't have that clear goal. Like, a lot of people they're just operating. They don't actually know what they're doing. They don't know where they're headed. They don't know how, let alone how they're going to get there. So if you don't know what you're doing, then forget everything I just talked about and go figure that out first. And then you can worry about this stuff later. But yeah, that's all for today. Hope you got something out of this episode. I know it was a little bit all over the place in ways, but I try to keep things simple. If you've been a long time listener, you'll probably realize by now that I like to do things in threes. So this episode, we talked about day in the life of, role clarity cards, and success roadmap or growth roadmap. So when I structure things in my business, it's always done in threes because it's easy for me to remember, it's easy for me to create, and it's just like less stuff I have to do. So that's another tip as well. I guess just throw that in there. People tend to remember things when they're in threes. So there you go. That's the episode for today. Hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll catch you all next time. Bye for now.